power.
We can't talk about all this without talking about two cases. Tragically, a shoplifter, a criminal who was stealing from a drugstore in San Francisco, got shot. And the video was released. I'm sure you've seen it, Sachs. And then here in New York, everybody's talking about this one instance of a Marine trying to subdue a violent homeless person with two other people. And it's on everybody's minds here. And Brooke Jenkins is not prosecuting in San Francisco the shooter. They look like, a clean shoot, as they would say in the police business, an appropriate, and it's tragic to say this, but the person did charge the security guard. The security guard did fear for their life and shot him. So Brooke Jenkins is not going to pursue anything. But in New York City, they're pursuing manslaughter for the person who did seem a bit excessive from the video. It's hard to tell what the reality is in these situations. Any thoughts on it, David? These two cases in two cities, two cities.
Yeah, look, I mean, the only time you can get a Soros DA excited about prosecuting someone is when they act in self-defense or defense of others. I mean, this Marine, I guess Daniel Penny is his name, he was acting in defense of others. The person who he stopped was someone with an extensive criminal record who had just recently engaged in an attempted kidnapping, who had punched elderly people, had
pretty gnarly track record,
dozens of arrests. In fact, people on Reddit were talking about how dangerous this person was. Apparently, a dozen years ago or so, he was seen as more of like a quirky, like Michael Jackson impersonator.
Street performer.
But something happened. This is according to a Reddit post that I saw, where something happened and there was some sort of psychological break. And then since then, he's had dozens and dozens of crimes, and they just keep letting him loose through this revolving door of a justice system we have. And now, look, no one likes to see him basically dying. And yeah, it's too bad. It's horrible that happened.
Tragic.
I don't know, though, that if you're trying to stop someone, I don't know how easy it is to precisely control whether you use too much force or not. So I think Daniel Penny has a strong case that he was acting in self-defense and defense of others.
And there were two other people, by the way, who were holding this person down.
There were three of them restraining him.
And what universally New Yorkers said to me, of all different backgrounds, was this is not a race issue. The other, I think one or two of the other people were people of color. It was not a race issue, and they're trying to make it into a race issue in both these cases. And this is literally what happens. It just, having been through this in New York in the 70s and 80s, when you do not...
who's they? Who's they when you say trying to make it a race issue?
There are a bunch of protests on the street, both in San Francisco and New York, people protesting these as, justice issues. The fact is, if you allow lawlessness for too long a period of time, you get a Bernie Getz situation. And Bernie Getz, people can look it up in the 80s. I was a kid when it happened, but they tried to mug somebody. He had a gun. He shot him. And this is what happens if you allow lawlessness for extended periods of time. It's just, you're basically gambling.
And what happened to Bernie Getz?
He got not guilty.
He got not guilty, but I think he had an illegal gun, so he was guilty of that. The Bernie Getz thing was really crazy because at the time, the climate in New York and this 1984 shooting, there was a portion of people who, I don't want to say they made him a hero, but they made it this is what happens if you allow us to be assaulted forever. We're going to fight back at some point. That was the vibe in New York when I was a child. I was 14, 15 years old when this happened. He was charged with attempted murder, assault, reckless
endangerment. Jason, what was the name of that vigilante group that used to walk the streets? The Something Angels?
That was the Guardian Angels,
right? Guardian Angels.
So it was so bad in the 80s. And I actually almost signed up for the Guardian Angels. I went to their headquarters because I was practicing martial arts and I thought I would check it out. And they had their office in Hell's Kitchen. I didn't wind up joining. But what they would do is they would just ride the subway. They would wear a certain type of hat and wear a Guardian Angel shirt. And all they did was just ride the subways, a red beret, and they would just ride the subways. And you felt safe.
What kind of martial arts were you taking?
Taekwondo. I was in Taekwondo, yeah. This is before mixed martial arts, but they just rode the subways. And honestly, I've been on the subways with them many times. You felt safe. And it wasn't vigilantes. They were guardian angels. They used that term. And many times they would do exactly what this Marine did, which is try to subdue somebody who was committing crime. I had two distinct instances where people tried to mug me, riding the subways in New York in the 80s. Two distinct times. And one was a group of people and one was one person. Like it was pretty scary. Both times I navigated it, but it was, not pleasant in the 80s in New York.
Can I say one more thing about this Daniel Penny, Jordan Neely case? So look, at the end of the day, this is going to be litigated. I don't know all the details. They're going to have to litigate whether Daniel Penny's use of force was excessive or not. But here's the thing, is that the media has been falsely representing Jordan Neely by only posting 10-year-old photos of him and leaving out crucial information. This was a press report. So again, this is why I mentioned the whole Michael Jackson impersonator thing, is that the media keeps portraying Neely as this innocent, harmless guy who is this like delightful Michael Jackson impersonator. In truth, he hasn't done that in more than a decade because, again, he had some sort of mental break. And since then, he's been arrested over 40 times, including for attempting to kidnap a 7-year-old child.
Oof.
And so the media is not portraying this case, I think, in an accurate way. And I think as a result of that, it leads to pressure on the DA to prosecute someone who has, I think, a strong self-defense claim. Or, maybe the DA just wants to do this anyway. And it gives the DA cover to do this.
Soros is, I mean, I know that we had this back and forth with this.
But why is CNN being inaccurate, do you think, Sachs?
They're basically cooperating with Alvin Bragg's interpretation of the case. And they're trying to make the case against Penny look as damning as possible.
Yeah, why don't they just take it straight down the middle? It's a tragedy. We have a screwed up situation here. We got a mental health crisis. And it's a tragedy for everybody involved. On the Bernie Getz stuff, he served 8 of a 12-month sentence for the firearm charge. And he had a massive $43 million civil judgment against him in 1996, a decade later. It's just...
This is a little different than the Getz thing, because pulling out a gun and shooting somebody
that's deadly intent. Yeah,
that's a huge escalation here. Whereas Penny, he's a trained Marine, right?
He's trying to immobilize him.
He has to believe that he's just trying to subdue Neely. And so he's not using a chokehold to kill him. That's an unfortunate consequence of what happened. But he was trying to restrain the guy. As far as we know, right? As far as we know.
Yeah. I mean, tragedies all around. We got to have law and order. I tweeted, like, I don't know why we still have the post office. Maybe we could make that like once a week and redo all of that space and allow every American who's suffering from mental illness to check in to what used to be the post office, maybe like once a week. And obviously you can give those people very gentle landings, but I don't think we need postal service more than once or twice a week. And then let's reallocate some money towards mental health in this country, where anybody who's sick, who feels like they're violent or feels like they're suicidal, can just go into a publicly provided facility and say, I'm a sick person, please help me. This would solve a lot of problems in society. We've got a mental health crisis. We should provide mental health services to all Americans. And it's an obviously easy thing for us to afford to do.
And if we had done that, then this never would have happened.
Exactly. I mean, literally, you have Sachs, who wants to balance the budget, saying, hey, this is something worth spending on. We can all agree on this.
Compared to the impact on society, I don't think it would be a huge expense.
We would save money. We'd save money because a city like San Francisco could become quite livable, or New York. And then, God forbid, these terrible school shootings, if you avoid even one of them, it's 30 people's lives or 10 people's lives. So it's
Jacob, we don't
well
need to convert post offices. What we need to do is stand up scaled shelters, and it doesn't need to be done on the most expensive land in a given city.
Do it outside of cities. Why does there is no expectation in Europe for like Paris or London to be affordable, or Hong Kong to be affordable. There are affordable places 30 minutes outside of those places where you could put these facilities.